So now that we've talked about how the immune system is supposed to work, let's talk about a few things that can go wrong. So first, we want to talk a little bit about how we even assess immune function in order to be able to determine how well our immune system is functioning. And so first, for a healthy person with high-level functioning immune system, we should actually see low levels of white blood cells, so low levels of lymphocytes, and specifically the phagocytes that we talked about. These should be low during normal functioning, when the person has not been exposed to some type of pathogen, just on a regular day when you're feeling good. You should have relatively low levels of those white blood cells. But you should see an increase in those as soon as you're exposed to a pathogen, or if it's a specific antigen as well, right? So as soon as a foreign body gets into your body, you should show a spike in these white blood cells, which shows that your immune system is ramping up and getting ready to handle these pathogens. So we talk a lot about immunocompetence. This is the word that refers to our overall ability of our immune system at any given time to defend the body against harmful effects of foreign agents. And so, health psychology researchers are very interested in looking at individual differences in immunocompetence as well as different factors that impact that. But how do we assess this, right? There's a number of different ways that researchers can do this. Very often, psychoimmunologists will do blood tests, and so they'll draw some blood and they'll be able to look at T cell counts. Again, that's one of the white blood cells that's involved in the immune system, right? We said that the T cells were involved in several different processes, right? They're at the hub there with the helper T, but then also there's T cells that are involved specifically in the specific immunity, right? And so these are so we can draw blood and test for levels of different T cells to see how active our immune system is, and we might do that just at baseline and hope that that's low, that should be low if you're not exposed to a pathogen, or we can test people who have been exposed to something like a cold virus and see how those spike, and those should spike in healthy people and target that pathogen. Other ways that researchers can look at this is through like a scratch and heal test, and what they do in this is what it sounds like. They'll basically make a small wound on a person, a little punch hole or a scratch, and then see how quickly that heals, and that can give an indication of how well your immune system is functioning. If it's functioning well, then that should heal quickly, and if it's functioning poorly, then that will heal more slowly. And so these are just a few of the ways that we look at the functioning of the immune system. So immune deficiency or immunocompromise, this is just another term that I want to define before we get into more about the ways that the immune system can go wrong. And so this is the first one I want to talk about. And so this is when there's an inadequate immune response. And so this can occur naturally. Some people just have a weaker immune system than other people. It can also be due to a disease. There's certain diseases that we can get that specifically weaken our immune system, and certain drugs can do that too. We'll talk later when we get to autoimmune disorders about some of the ways that we treat those actually suppress parts of the immune system, and so that can lead to being immunocompromised. I think the most common example used when talking about immune deficiency is AIDS, right? And this is literally called the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And so this is caused by a virus, HIV, and what that does is it compromises your overall immune system. And so people don't technically actually die of AIDS usually. They die of other things that they contract due to having the HIV virus and having it progress far in their body, and so that leaves them vulnerable to dying of things like pneumonia and other things that normally they would have been able to fight off. So that's the first problem that can go wrong, is this immune deficiency or being immunocompromised. Another thing that can go wrong, as we'll see here, is ideally the immune system the goal is to destroy foreign material in the body, any pathogen that gets in, things that are not the self. But sometimes it makes mistakes, and it can do so in a couple of ways. So first, with allergies, it can make a mistake, and it can be oversensitive and identify things that are not actually harmful in any way. So innocuous substances like pollen or peanuts that shouldn't be harmful, but it identifies them as harmful and mounts an immune response to those. And it's the immune response that is the problematic part of the allergy, right? So allergens are normally harmless foreign substances, but our body treats them like it's a pathogen. And so it, starts this whole immune response, and is particularly the inflammatory response. And so we talked before about histamines and mast cells, and they start this inflammation response that can be bringing pus to certain areas or leading to swelling, but it can also lead to more mucus and eyes watering depending on where that allergen is getting in. And so again, this is why people take antihistamines for allergies. This helps to block that overactive response. So some really interesting things about allergies. So first of all, this surprised me when I first learned this statistic, that approximately 40% of people have allergies. And interestingly, it's just 8 foods that account for over 90% of these allergies. These are things like tree nuts, eggs, soy, peanuts, fish, shellfish, milk, and wheat. Those are the most common allergens. And so this is an interesting thing to know, because it suggests that there's really something about the protein structures on the surface of these types of molecules that, while they're not the same as other things that are pathogens, somehow for many people the body is misidentifying those as harmful. And so certainly people can be allergic to a much broader array of things, but those are the most common ones, the most common protein structures that lead to allergies. And so scientists are still not really sure why we have allergies, but there does seem to be a genetic component. If you have one parent who has allergies, you have 33% chance that you'll have allergies. If both do, you'll have a 70% chance. But what's really interesting is that it doesn't mean you're going to get the same allergy. Often kids of parents with allergies have different allergies, and so you're likely to have an allergy, but not always the same one. Maybe your parent is allergic to peanuts and you're really allergic to tree nuts. And so we're still not sure really what's going on with that. Let me see, what else did I want to say about that? Right, so again, what's happening? So interestingly, rates of allergies have been increasing fairly dramatically over the past few years, particularly since the 1980s, and in the developed world specifically. And so reports of food allergies among children in the U.S., for example, rose by 20% from 1997 to 2007. And so people are really interested in why. Why are we seeing such an increase in allergies? And a couple of different hypotheses have been put forth. One is that it might be due to air pollution and increased levels of that, and that we're basically being exposed to more things that irritate our immune system, and then this can lead it to be more overactive and to respond to other things that are not harmful. And so there are some studies that seem to support this, but it doesn't seem to account enough, that people, even in relatively clean areas, it doesn't fluctuate enough with pollution to have that fully account for this. So another hypothesis that has been put forth, and there's much more support for this one, is what we call microbial deprivation. And this essentially means that everything is too clean in a lot of developed areas. And so because people are not exposed as much to more benign potential pathogens, just like dirt and things like that aren't going to cause a problem in the body, because we don't have less severe things to fight against, then our immune system doesn't have anything to work on, and so it starts to attack things that are not problematic. And so, while we certainly don't want to go back to the time where we had dysentery in the water making us really sick and dying, having things be so clean that we're not exposed to any germs or to very few germs seems to lead the immune system to become overactive and start to fight against things that wouldn't normally be problematic. And so some evidence to support this, there's a few different things. First, we've seen that children who go to daycare tend to have fewer allergies, children who grow up on farms have fewer allergies, and children who have dogs have fewer allergies than children who don't have dogs. And all of these things are places where you would be exposed to a fair amount of germs and different pathogens, but generally ones that are not really severe. And so this, again, helps to tune the immune system to make it effective and not overreactive. It gives it something to do. Some other really interesting evidence for this microbial deprivation hypothesis comes from some really cutting-edge work where they're trying to treat allergies by infecting people with parasites or with hookworms. And what they find is that people with really severe allergies, if you infect them with a parasite and basically that gives their immune system something to do, it tries to fight that parasite, their allergies become less severe. They show less of an allergic reaction in the presence of allergens. Of course, this isn't the ideal treatment because having parasites has its own effects on the body, and so this is really a trial thing where they're looking at are there other ways that we could introduce benign pathogens to give the immune system something to do so that allergies are not so severe. And then another thing about allergies, right, so those are ways that they're trying to treat some types of really severe allergies. Another way that we treat allergies is through allergy shots. I actually used to get these. I'm allergic to just about everything. Cats, dogs, pollen, mold, dust. Not any foods, luckily, but all of those sort of environmental allergens. And so for most of high school and university, I went every week and got a shot. And what the goal of this is to gradually expose the body to what it thinks is this pathogen, and to help it get used to that. And so over time, this exposure helps the body to not mount such a severe response to that. But you can only do this for allergies that are not super severe, right? So if it's a really severe allergy, even this really small dose of the allergen is going to be too much and kick off an allergic response. Like, for example, I have a cousin who's really, really severely allergic to tree nuts. And for example, like she has a roommate at the time, and you're not allowed to eat nuts, but my cousin was out of town. The roommate thought it would be okay to eat an ice cream bar with some nuts. My roommate came back a week later, touched a dish that hadn't been washed, touched her eye, and her eye swelled to the size of a football, right? So that kind of really severe allergy shots are not going to work for, because even that really small dose injected into the body is going to be too powerful and amount to too much of a issue. So allergies. And then the next way that the immune system can make mistakes occurs in autoimmune disorders. And essentially what happens here, it's summed up in this lovely little comic, is that the line between the self, or what my own tissues are, and what are invaders or pathogens becomes blurred, and the body starts to attack itself, and so it starts to break down its own tissues instead of pathogens. And obviously this is a bad thing, right? This is what the rats were suffering from when we talked about the Adler and Cohen studies. They had lupus, which is one type of autoimmune disorder. This is just a schematic rendering of this from a textbook that I used to use, and this is just showing what a normal immune response should look like, right? There's some kind of virus that invades the body. And in this case, we're talking about the specific immune system and the humoral antibody-mediated immune system. And so this antigens invade the body. You'd have some antibodies form. They'd bond to those, and then they don't technically remove the pathogens themselves, but this is a schematic drawing, but the macrophages come along to those tagged pathogens or antigens and eat those up, and then the antibodies remain behind and are there to protect you in the future, right? But what happens often in autoimmune disorders is that the immune system forms some antibodies that are off in the sense that they're targeted to our own tissues. So it might be some part of your gut. Right, that's what happens in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. It might happen in other parts of your body. We'll talk about there's a whole host of different autoimmune disorders that people can have, and this is essentially that it's occurring in different areas of the body where this overactive immune system is attacking self tissues. And so then what they do is they attack again this own parts of the body, and this leads to inflammation and tissue damage. And so this is what's occurring in autoimmune disorders. There's over 80 different types of autoimmune disorders, right? And as you can see here, they're all affecting different parts of the body. And so things like rheumatoid arthritis is affecting the connective tissues, like in your fingers and joints. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, those affect the digestive tract. I'm lucky to just have ulcerative colitis just in the lower part of the digestive tract, just in the colon area. But most of really all of my cousins have Crohn's disease. It affects the whole digestive tract. Lots of fun, nasty symptoms from all of those things. If the autoimmune disorder is affecting the brain, multiple sclerosis is one type of autoimmune disorder of the brain. Fibromyalgia affects muscle connections. Graves' disease is the thyroid gland. Type 1 diabetes is affecting the pancreas. Psoriasis is when your body is attacking its own skin cells, and the list goes on. But all of these share that they're characterized by inflammation, right? So a lot of the same drugs that are used to treat psoriasis, for example, are also used to treat Crohn's or arthritis. And so these are, because they're all characterized by the same inflammatory response. And so ways that we treat these are with anti-inflammatories as well as with immunosuppressant drugs, right? So if your immune system is overactive, then we might want to suppress it. That's what they were conditioning in the rats in that study, was they were giving them an immunosuppressant drug to basically tamp down their immune system so that it would not attack the body so much. But of course, there's some issues with this, right? If you take immunosuppressant drugs, then your immune system is suppressed, and that leaves you vulnerable to other things. And so this is, in the US, we have just so many ads for medicines on TV, and so I always remember all the ones for medication for autoimmune disorders, and they always say, make sure you've had a tuberculosis test, don't travel anywhere where there's lots of diseases that you haven't been exposed to before, and this is because you're going to be severely immunocompromised, and so you really don't want to have any viruses in the body like tuberculosis that could take over, and you don't want to expose yourself to more things because while you're managing your autoimmune disorder, which is really important, you're more at risk for catching other things. So that's what I wanted to say about that. So I think I'm going to end this section here. And so we talked about a few ways that the immune system can go wrong. It can make mistakes in identifying the self as the pathogen with autoimmune disorders. It can make mistakes and identify harmless things as pathogens in the case of allergies, and it can also just be suppressed either due to individual differences or to exposure to a disease or to a medication, like the one we're talking about here, that suppress your immune system, and so you could have reduced immunocompetence. And so these are 3 things that can go wrong with the immune system. See you in the next video.